let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
So Euro 2024 kicks off. We've had 7 matches so far. We just finished watching England. Adam, what's your opinion of the tournament so far and the performance that you've seen from England, with it only being the first match so far? But I'm not going to say anything about Harry Kane, but Adam, go.
The tournament it's still really early days, so I think it's hard for me to kind of make a definitive judgment on that. I really enjoyed. I know it was Scotland, and apologies for anyone that's Scottish, but just like the efficiency of the German team and like the talent they have with Musiala, and is it Florian Wirtz? Like they have some really good young players. So and the fact that the home team they really arrived at that occasion. Like they really kind of took it in, and there's the old saying that you always have to beat what's in front of you, however you perceive them to be, and they did exactly that. Beyond that, I'm just excited to kind of see like what sort of team will France bring this year. What kind of Italy will we see? I think Spain looked really good. 3-0. They look like shades of their old self, where they're very possession heavy, very good at looking after the ball. So yeah, it's been a positive start. I have to say, I don't quite get the excitement that I get with a World Cup. I was saying to a friend that, with respect, watching like a Hungary versus Switzerland is not the same as like watching Brazil play, say, South Korea. Like you don't get those additional flavors, if you will. So it's been a solid start, but I feel like it's still warming up. To go on to the England performance, I kind of left the performance a little bit underwhelmed. I felt some of the old problems were still persisting. So the first thing I was looking at was, how do we get more from Phil Foden? He's obviously had probably one of his best seasons domestically and with Man City. Really good numbers. Objectively, he's done well. Subjectively, like carrying the ball, very exciting to watch. Only saw shades of that in the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes today. So I think if I was to summarize the performance, there was a lack of cohesion, I felt. There wasn't much interplay between the midfield and the attack, and I feel we have to really address that if we're going to actually take on bigger and better teams with respect to Serbia.
Do you think at any point that Southgate should have swapped it up sooner rather than later? Like it seemed like he waited until a little bit later than the normal substitution time, and his substitutions were surprising. It's not that they weren't good; they turned out to be good. So maybe as fans, and we're looking at this from the outside in, we didn't see something. But like others have said, Gallagher was surprised, but when he got out there, he was quite solid.
Yeah, and I felt that actually two of the players that could hold their heads high were Saka and Bellingham. So I was a little bit surprised to see Saka coming off, but maybe that was just some preservation of the legs. And actually, Bowen pleasantly surprised me. He obviously, very early on, probably within the first or second minutes, kind of roasted his left back, got a good cross into Kane, and Kane's probably should have done better, and the keepers managed to tip it onto the bar. I agree. I think the subs did have an impact, and that's probably even just a virtue of them having fresh legs on players that have been on for, say, 70 minutes. But yeah, absolutely. I also feel like we probably needed some tactical changes. So the one thing I was a little bit surprised at was not seeing Cole Palmer. One of the talking points is the omission of James Maddison and Jack Grealish. So I feel like one apprehension we probably have as fans is, where is the creativity coming from? So I feel like there'll be a big impetus on Cole Palmer to provide that creativity. And I always just have a thing that like players like that, especially young players, get them embedded in the tournament early. Don't wait too long. I think we did that in one of the last tournaments where we didn't see Sancho, we didn't see a lot of Saka, and then we threw these guys into like penalty shootouts and they missed their respective penalties. So, yes, to answer your question more succinctly, I'd have liked to have seen changes maybe around the 65th minute, and also a little bit of tactical flexibility. I still have this issue as well with Harry Kane being super deep, and at times it's like we play with no actual striker or no height in our attack.
How concerning was it when you saw the flashes of the old England coming back with their same old tactics of sitting back on the ball and not doing the things that they needed to do because they were pushing, and then all of a sudden they just decided to sit back and go, we have a lead. Let's just hang on to here and struggle until the very end.
Well, it's a good question. It's somewhat paradoxical because I feel Gareth Southgate respectfully came from a generation of England footballers or English football culture on the field that was very much mired in pragmatism. And, we always had a few, if I use the word mavericks, but English football was always a little bit kind of meh in the mid-90s and approaching the millennium. So the irony for me is that he actually has the players we actually have some really exciting, talented players, but we still have this kind of play not to lose mentality as opposed to play to win. And I think probably what happened today was we scored too early. I feel like with someone of Southgate's tactical approach, maybe that's a negative. Maybe it actually is, you want to score a little bit later on in the game. Because as you say, he seems to have this default where it's all about preservation and maintaining. And it played into Serbia's hands because on another day, I feel like they could have grabbed the equalizer, and credit to them, they showed a huge reaction in the second half. And they pressed and hurried us. And yeah, on another day, I feel like we walk away with a point and not 3 there. So I think he has to take the handbrake off. He has to trust those players and that talent he has at his disposal.
So with the tactics you've seen so far and what you've seen in the past, however many years Southgate's been in charge, do you still think Southgate is the man for the Three Lions, or do they need to move on to somebody else? And if so, who do you think would be a good substitution for him?
Yeah, it's probably a really good question. And if you ask, I feel right now that the fan base is very divisive. Because we've had nearly, if I'm not mistaken, 9 years of Southgate, maybe close to 10. So, firstly, I think he has a lot of credit in the bank. Let's be objective. We've got to the semi-finals of a World Cup. That hadn't happened in my lifetime, at least.
I was going to say, to be fair, for the last 20 years, he's by far the best one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can also look at it objectively and subjectively if you're talking about style, but ultimately, we haven't gone this far. We made it to the final of the last European Championships. So, I guess like the real question is, can he get us over the line? He's built a great foundation. He has, the players clearly like him. They do turn up. I don't feel like I watch an England performance where they're generally like not motivated or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But I feel like all great managers and great players to that effect have that X factor. They can pull something out from deep within them. I'm not sure that's really Southgate. So I actually believe whatever happens, he will step aside or he will go. If he wins it, he leaves on a high, right? Like he doesn't really need to stay.
Well, his record so far kind of speaks for itself. He's got the wins behind him. The only manager to have higher wins than him is Big Sam at 100%. So, I mean, may have only
big
been
shoes to follow those.
may have only been one match, but hey,
100% is 100%. And then obviously, if we don't progress, then I mean, this is quite natural for tournament football, right? Then you start to look at fresh ideas. The second part of your question is a really interesting one because I've given this some consideration. And like for me, as I said earlier, the key thing for me is who can unlock the potential, who can unlock the talent in the team. Because I think there is a lot of talent in that team. With respect, I grew up watching England teams full of like Paul Ince and David Batties, and we had good players, but you know, I look at Jude Bellingham today, who is arguably the best player, and so much the ceiling is so much higher than the players I grew up watching. So that's exciting.
Is that necessarily true though? Like if you look at the 02 team, that team was packed full of superstars and talent like you wouldn't believe. They just couldn't play together.
I don't
because
know
of
though.
club level stuff.
I maybe would push back on that a little bit because, I mean, I respect someone like Steven Gerrard. He won a Champions League, but he didn't win the league. I look at the likes of,
Look at the individual player for their position though.
yeah,
At the time, was there anybody much better than Gerrard, or Lampard, or John Terry?
well,
I'm sure you can make an argument for individuals all over the place, and people that don't like those teams are always going to say, "Well, this guy was better," or "This guy was better."
but I guess what I'm doing though, I'm looking at Bellingham from a world view. So what I'm saying is I think there's a clear case that he could be one of the best midfielders in the world right now, and he's only 20. Like, he's probably in the Ballon d'Or conversation. I don't know if you could necessarily say that consistently about, like, Gerrard, probably Lampard, actually, because his output. I think Lampard was actually a phenomenal midfielder, and if he played today, his value would be God knows what. But I just feel I think Saka's another one. He's a bit divisive, but he was really good today. I feel like he's somebody that gives us a bit of an X factor. But I just feel like there's more, for me as well, like Harry Kane. Like, I don't think he had a shot on target today apart from the header. And it's just finding someone that can really open up the creativity in this England side. So I find myself pondering, what would somebody like Maurizio Pochettino do? And I'll justify this with, he's got a really good track record with working with younger players, particularly young British players. He did this at Southampton. He did this at Spurs. I actually think that at Chelsea it was starting to gel a little bit, and whatever happened behind the scenes happened, and I feel that was a bit of a crazy decision personally. And I just feel like, well, yeah, maybe we again, England goes through these cycles where we kind of have domestic homegrown managers, and then we go through this loop and we're like, all right, let's appoint someone a little bit more left field. We had Sven-Goran Eriksson, we've had Fabio Capello. Maybe we're at another point in time where we look at someone that isn't necessarily English, but is very, very well experienced in the English game and with English players. So he's someone that pops into my head. I know probably tons of people right now will be like, no, it's got to be an English person or whatever. But I feel like he has a very good track record at unlocking potential. Naysayers may win. Well, he didn't really win anything domestically in England, but I don't really think he was at clubs long enough. And even at Spurs, even as a Spurs fan, he could have taken us to that next level, but the club didn't have their same ambition. It's also like, you don't want to be hyperbolic. It's the first game. We did win. I think what's good now is the players will reflect on that. Southgate will reflect on that. I make this prediction, you'll see some changes in that lineup for the second game. I predict you'll see Cole Palmer. I also predict that probably Cole Palmer. The defense wasn't too bad, to be fair. Not sure about Trippier's legs over 90 minutes. That was a bit of a question mark. He's also, I believe, on the left side. But we've got to find a way of getting some creativity into that side. Maybe Gallagher starts as well. I wasn't convinced by Trent in that kind of hybrid midfield role. I wasn't really sold on it at the beginning, and I wasn't sold on it in the end. So I think some minor tweaks, and maybe we can actually open up some of the talent in that team.
So what do you think England's chances are moving forward? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you think they'll actually go all the way? Or is there a chance? I guess there's always a chance, but is it a realistic chance?
I think we'll progress out of the group. I would also assume that we would at least get through the last 16. But just based on today's performance, we really have to step it up. Semis, finals, nothing in today's performance shouted that we are like the team to watch. And again, if you compare that to Spain's performance or Germany's, you can see that intent. You can see that these guys have, the rubber's hitting the road already. You couldn't say that with England today.
Is that necessarily a fair comparison? Because Germany was playing against Scotland, like you said, which isn't exactly the best team.
Yeah.
And I thought both Spain and Italy were extremely boring to watch.
Yeah.
And is that because they were playing against kind of I don't want to say a shittier team, but a lesser team? Like you're talking about like a top quality club that they should have blown them out the same as Germany did, potentially.
Well, of course, it's hard to compare apples to oranges, right? Serbia is not Scotland. Scotland is not any other country. But I guess
How's your way of saying that they're at the very, very bottom?
Well, I felt sorry for them, to be honest. I felt that you always get teams in tournaments that are, quite frankly, out of their depth, and they'll have a good go, but they don't have the players.
They basically have just two players the only two players I really know of are John McGinn and McTominay. So,
well, I mean,
the
goalkeeper plays for Norwich, I believe, in League One, has been an understudy for a lot of his career. The fella that got sent off, I hadn't heard of. With respect, I don't rate the Scottish League. I don't think it. I think if that's probably like a League One standard at best. But I think just to elaborate on my statement, really, I'm just looking at the English performance and cohesion. That's kind of the word I'm looking at. Regardless of whoever Germany were playing, they had an idea, they had a style, and it was very, very effective. I didn't really see any cohesion today. I didn't see any sort of synergy between what Harry Kane was doing, what Saka was doing. Saka made a couple of crosses into the box in the first half. There's nobody in there. I think where Southgate, the question marks for me, is tactically. It's just like I need to see those patterns or those clearly defined moments where you're seeing the best of those players actually manifest. And I couldn't really say that today, apart from maybe the Bowen to Kane cross in the second half. Need to see more of like less of the square pegs and round holes, I guess, So for me, the Trent experiment, and I said it already, like we've got to get Kane higher up the field. He was picking up the ball on the deeper midfield today. So I just feel like if you were to compare England with the other national teams that I mentioned, the project, if you want to use that terminology, looked a little bit further away from wherever Germany are at, So
right.
Again, it was just one game, right? So maybe things click in the second game, but we're going to have to really step it up when we play, those top-ranked opposition that you have to beat if you want to win these things. You're going to have to find solutions and find a way to create. So, early days, it's not. I sound like a major pessimist, but I think that's just because I know we have some really good players, so let's unlock that.
Well, as of right now, this win takes the pressure off of England. The other two teams in the group they were both draws, so it almost guarantees us all the way through. As someone else here mentioned, I guess we'll find out some more on Thursday. They play next,
yes,
which we'll be in Toronto for, and to go and see them.
Yeah,
that'll be fun. So we'll have to find out what bar we're going to, and we'll have to maybe set up the next podcast to talk about that. And
the evolution is on the road, right? The Gorilla Podcast. We are on the roof of this bar in Toronto. Is that a mic, or are you just pleased to see me?
All right. Well, I guess this is it for this episode. We'll continue with a part 2 for the Euros. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, Ian.
Thanks.